Okay, folks, so we are very lucky to have Mary, our brand new CEO at YACVic, join us for the first YPPN of 2024. She's going to introduce herself, talk a little bit about her history, how she's come to YACVic, and any goals or objectives that she's already identified in her first 3.5 weeks, maybe? Is it 4 weeks yet?
Yeah, fourth week now.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, it's great to have you here, Mary. I'll pass over to you, and then we'll open up for a little Q&A at the end.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that scene setting, Sam, and also for inviting me along. I was very keen to have an opportunity to introduce myself and also to, I suppose, just have a chat with you all. I thought what would be useful was perhaps to speak to my journey coming to YACVic and why I think it's such an exciting time for us to be working collaboratively together. I guess if I might just start with introducing myself. As I said, Sam noted, my name is Mary Nega, and I do use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling from Wurundjeri country. And I suppose in terms of what brought me to YACVic, I'll try not to bore you with a life story, but I guess if I were to weave a common thread through the work that I've been doing to date, I'd say it's been in supporting underrepresented or marginalized communities. And in terms of how that's taken shape, that's largely focused on supporting young people and new and emerging communities, specifically culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And that's taken shape in a number of different ways. I've either contributed to, led, or been part of a broader team through a number of different initiatives that I think have done a couple of things. Enabled access to viable pathways for gainful employment for underrepresented communities, developed skills, for underrepresented communities in areas or professions where there's a clear need, but also developed skills in advocacy for young people. And then I guess finally provided a bit of a bridging piece in developing access to justice for communities that are potentially underserved. And so I guess where that led me was to my most recent appointment at Global Voices. It's a small non-profit, youth-led and run, which supports young people with some fairly lofty ambitions to support young people to engage with the myriad of different challenges that we're facing as a society and as a collective, noting that young people are oftentimes disproportionately impacted. Our focus areas were on gender, climate, inclusive development, the economy, public health, and the intersecting areas for each of those. And we did that by way of a fellowship program, which essentially enabled them to identify areas that they wished to explore or felt there was a gap in the domestic policy landscape, and to enable them to be equipped with the ability to carry forward their change-making endeavours into the future. So I suppose one of the biggest things that I took away from that was just the importance of elevating voices, amplifying their voices, and equipping them with the ability to navigate spaces that are potentially difficult for young people to envisage themselves in. Our fellowships took them to typically international spaces, so UN-level forums, but the aim was always to bring them back domestically, enable them to make change on a grassroots level. And I suppose there's a bit of a parallel in my thinking around my own journey. I see great value in YACVic as a place-based peak body with really deep-seated networks and connections with community and individuals like yourself and yourselves in working collectively towards the future that we want to see for young people in Victoria. And so I suppose that feeds nicely into what I see some really fantastic opportunities moving forward for us. YACVic is in the middle of developing its strategic plan for the next 4 years, and feeding into that, we are really deeply committed to widespread consultation, as well as understanding the priorities from the sector and young people moving forward. And so I'm very, very excited. That's probably one of my really key priorities moving forward, to understand your perceptions, thoughts, hopes for YACVic, but also the youth sector at large and young people. And so I suppose I just wanted to speak to that piece and invite you all to collaborate with us as we move on that journey and reassess our priorities, our advocacy priorities, and ensuring that we are keeping pace with the emerging issues that young people are facing, and that the sector, demands attention for So with that said, I won't, hog the mic. I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. I'm eager to hear from the group. I appreciate we are large in numbers as to what has brought you to this sector and I suppose what your hopes and aspirations for YACVic, but also the youth sector are and how we can work collaboratively together. So I'll open the floor.
All right, I might just jump in and use my host hat. So yeah, folks, if you would like to ask Mary a question, there's two key ways to do that. Popping it in the chat and everyone can see that, or you could message me privately and I can pose it to Mary anonymously, I guess, unless you want to be named. Or you could pop your hand up just using the raise hand function, and then you can pop your mic on and ask the question. Just whilst we're waiting for any of those to come through, I'm kind of really interested, Mary, having worked in a youth-led environment, what kind of observations you got from that, or are there any tips that you've picked up that you think you're bringing into YACVic? It's a different kind of environment. Are there any kind of reflections on that you've had?
Absolutely. So I think when I think to some of the big takeaways, I think young people are increasingly interested and appropriate advocates for change for themselves as well. And I think that's a really, really exciting prospect. Unfortunately, they're typically under-consulted, but disproportionately impacted by the key challenges that face society at large, and really need to be pivotal and centered in the conversations that are both impacting them, but also our collective futures. And so that's a really key takeaway. And I suppose one of my key missions is to keep beating that drum with whoever needs to hear it, that young people need to be consulted actively on all issues impacting our collective futures. I guess other observations are probably not unique or unknown to those in the room, but we all work in spaces that are probably, chronically under-resourced, and we've got some really, really incredible people here who do it because they're passionate and because they really believe in the work that we do. And it's probably informed, why I thought coming to YACVic at this time would be just such an incredible opportunity to build capacity within the sector and to enable us to support one another as we work towards our really lofty ambitions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I love that. We've got Dan who has a question. Do you want to pop your mic on, Dan?
Hey, Mary, how you going? Congratulations, by the way. It's pretty, I think, I don't speak on behalf of the sector, but I will. I think we're stoked to have someone like you looking after and overseeing our peak body. And good to hear that the strategic planning's underway. One of the things I do a lot of work with is trying to engage and work with that 12 to 18-year-old age group. And it seems, I think that 12 to 25 youth bracket or 12 to 30 youth bracket is a really interesting thing to think about. And I'm wondering, within your 4 weeks, whether you had a chance to even think about that, or whether that's got some space within the, because we talk about that all the time, but what that 12 to 18 cohort looks like and how we best support them often, I think, gets missed.
Dan, thank you for that really great question. It's one that's lingered in my mind as well, just in general, that broad catchment of youth. And there are differing definitions in different spaces as to what that means. I think the UN has started upping that now. And so we're seeing a really large sort of variation in lived experiences between what we would consider to be young people. I'm still doing the thinking there around that age bracket that you've identified, the 12 to 18 piece, but it's one that's certainly front of mind in how we ensure that we are adapting our supports appropriately for the stages of life that young people find themselves in. And the very real reality is, the advocacy priorities for 12 to 18 might be different than those from 18 to 25. And so we have to be alive to that piece. It's certainly a key consideration that's factoring in, but I really appreciate the question.
Yeah, I think the age point is really interesting. I've noticed that there's a lot of conversation about those middle years as well coming up. I feel like there's a growing pressure, particularly on local youth councils, government areas, to start bringing that age lower. And I've had some really interesting conversations with people on this network about how they make that move. They're under the pressure to do it, but they're trained as youth workers. And those that are younger don't operate. They don't have different needs from those in that youth bracket. So sorry, I don't think I have a question. I think it was just an observation.
Can I just build on that? Can I just build on that, Sam, just before, because I think what's most interesting is particularly, like, I'm thinking really purely within a participation framework too, in terms of what we like. You know, that 12 to 18 often exists in a different context, and it is a family context as well that needs to be considered. And so thinking about how you facilitate and support advocacy and participation of those children while still engaging with the fact that their context may be family and all the challenges and diversity of what that means, because that's not necessarily a smooth or easy thing, is a real challenge.
Yeah, 100% agree. All right, I'll pass over to Ella.
Hi, Mary. My name's Ella Wilkinson. Lovely to meet you. I'm a little bit of a niche part of this group. So I'm part of the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, and I manage the Education for Young People program. But through that, definitely linked with YACVic a little bit. Through that, we've had some young people from the Future Proof program speak at a couple of our events. So really, this is more just me kind of flagging that I know that YACVic recently last year got funding from the National Emergency Management Agency to develop the Centre of Excellence for Young People for Disasters, and noting that YACVic is that Victorian centric, but that's a national initiative. Us as like the sort of where the peak body or the National Institute for Disaster Resilience, like that's definitely something that we would be able to work with you and connect with people throughout the sector within the youth space, but also sort of that broader emergency management, disaster resilience landscape. So we're really excited to watch that specific project throughout the year.
Thanks very much, Ella. I'm also extremely excited about the Centre for Excellence. I think it's people, I mean, as I'm not sharing any views that I think are fairly controversial amongst this group, but recognising that disasters are increasingly more prevalent, and that, again, young people need to be heard in these conversations. It's an exciting time to be in a place-based organisation that's supporting a broad range of different stakeholders to ensure that young people are consulted on this piece. And perhaps what we could do is reach out offline and connect you to our team operating that piece. Sorry, not me getting distracted by the chat, but yeah, perhaps what we could do is put you guys in touch and have some further conversations around that piece, because we'd be very keen to lean into your expertise in that space as well.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. Thanks. I've been messaging with people, but can definitely take it offline.
Oh, yes, fantastic. Certainly not wishing to curtail the conversation, but I want to have a thorough and involve our team as well on the ground. So that'd be great.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so, yeah, such an important stakeholder in that project. Sorry to distract you, Mary. I was just putting the link in the chat for anyone that hadn't heard about the centre. It was announced middle of last year, but we've been in sort of contract and establishment phase / hell, and so there hasn't been a lot of announcements since then, and so that just takes you back to that original announcement. Awesome. Jono has put in the chat there, what role going forward does YACVic have on advocating for youth workers, specifically around safety of workers, ongoing employment, employer support, etc.?
Well, that's a really, really great question. Recognizing that I'm slightly early on, I certainly don't want this to be the last word on this point. So I'll also take that back to the team to get a bit of a sense of. But what I can say is that you might have seen that our youth sector survey has been released. And it's an opportunity to reflect on, I suppose, the youth sector large. I would imagine that working conditions for youth workers is involved in that piece as well. That's about building an evidence base to enable us to advocate with evidence to decision makers around what supports are necessary. So what I'll do is I'll go away and speak to our advocacy team to just check in about that piece. But I imagine that's been built into our youth sector survey. So that's the first piece of building the evidence base. And then from there, it's our intention to advocate on the key priorities that are being identified by service providers.
Thanks, Mary. I was trying to add into the chat the links to those surveys, but it's telling me it's too long. Anyway, it's in the
Perhaps we can circulate it after.
Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, I've asked the policy team to send it round actually, so it will come round to the network. Jono's also part of the steering committee for the upgrade of the Code of Ethical Practice, and so these are conversations that have been happening in the background as well, particularly around that safety part of youth workers, the way that the sector has moved and changed, particularly around lived experience, peer work, some of those new ethical situations that we find ourselves in as a sector that have progressed over the last kind of 15 years or so. Awesome. I'm very conscious of time. Has anybody got any final comments or final question before we farewell Mary?
I suppose just a quick comment from me then. I wanted to thank you all for the extremely warm reception in this space. I'm just, very grateful for the opportunity to interact with you all as we work collectively towards the future we want to see for young people in Victoria. Very, very excited to connect further and have ongoing conversations around the work that we do and the work that you do and how we can collaborate with one another. So if anyone does have any further questions that haven't been raised in this broader discussion, please do feel free to reach out to our team and I'd be happy to carry forward those conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. I'll stop the recording now.